I am currently under arrest for wearing a sign which subjectively you deem as being too controversial to provoke what?
About controversial? And what is that the fact that it is likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress?
So you admit that these people are what? Dangerous?
I'm not saying anything about these people. I don't think that's a necessary part of the offence that you've committed.
No, actually, I identify as a woman. Can I have a woman search me? Welcome to George Orwell, 1984, 2025. Thank you. Badge numbers and so forth, but yeah, apparently nonsense. So I've got a police officer giving his opinion now. That's rare. I thought they were supposed to be impartial.
I was in solitary for a good 9 hours, and I have been released on something called a pre-charge, which is not a charge, but it's to say that charges could come later on down the line, but also with bail conditions which ban me from the city of Westminster as well. So I'm no longer able to commute into the centre of London, all for wearing a placard stating a fact.
The erosion of free speech is becoming a harsh reality, all in the name of protecting others from potentially offensive opinions. Recently, a video began circulating online showing a man holding a sign that read, "Warning, trans flag equal mental illness." He was arrested by UK Metropolitan Police for allegedly committing an offence under laws targeting signs that could cause harassment or distress. The man in question is Montgomery Toms, a freedom campaigner based in the UK. As a young Christian man, Toms is actively fighting back against global authoritarianism, centralization, Agenda 2030, and undemocratic government overreach. Through grassroots activism, he's made it his mission to wake up young people to the ongoing erosion of freedom, democracy, and common sense in the UK. But when the government gets to decide what qualifies as free speech, is it really free at all? Gender dysphoria, once classified as mental illness, was declassified by the World Health Organization in an effort to remove stigma. Yet, body dysphoria remains listed as a mental health condition. So who gets to decide what is a valid opinion and what constitutes hate? Have far-left censorious activists now become the new arbiters of both speech and science? Let's now take a closer look at the story of Montgomery Toms.
The sign that you're wearing is going to cause friction within this crowd. Freedom of speech, all right? So we all have freedom of speech, okay? But that is going to cause a problem right here. In order to stop that, I would like you to remove it.
I attended a Pride parade. It happens in London every year. There seems to be a lot of them these days. There used to be, I think, just once a year, and now they just seem to be continuous. But nevertheless, I attended what I think their largest event on Saturday with a placard which was like a sandwich board, which said that the trans flag equals mental illness. Now, this once upon a time was actually kind of commonly accepted. Even the World Health Organization, I think 2 years ago, was still accepting trans, if you identified as trans, as being a mental illness. So what I was saying actually never used to be that controversial, and yet apparently it was. So my motivation is to, on a grassroots level, address a counter perspective that the mainstream don't like. And people don't like other people having opinions which contradict the mainstream. And that's what I went there to do. I went there to just assert my ability to have a different opinion. I lasted about 20, I'm going to say 30 minutes max before I was told by a police officer that I had to remove the sign. And then in the process of me negotiating that with the police officer wasn't really a negotiation, actually. It was more of the fact they said, take it off, and I said no.
We have a two-tier system in this country, and you're representing it. I have the freedom to do this. I'm not being antagonistic. This is called fact. This is my freedom of expression, and I should be able to have that conversation. Right? Look, I'm not getting into anyone's views on it. Like, you're quite entitled to your opinion, as is anyone else, right? For the purposes of avoiding any kind of disorder happening. So because of them, I have to shut my mouth up.
It's my right to do that, and they were basically making it clear that whilst my statement may be whatever, they didn't say this, but they're more concerned about how the huge amounts of trans individuals are going to react, which is quite telling. So it's less about me and it's more about their reaction. I made it really clear. It's like, you can't govern and police based off emotion. That's ridiculous. We're supposed to have law and constitution for a reason, and yet you're not addressing that. So past that point, I actually walked away because I wanted to continue to interact with these individuals, but I knew with the police around that area, it'd be worth just withdrawing myself from the situation, be calm, don't be overly antagonistic, there's no need. So I got a couple streets away, and then 9 police officers plus the 2 original ones that originally spoke to me came round the corner and handcuffed me and arrested me. So in total, 11 officers who arrested me for wearing a placard which essentially says something which used to be considered the truth, but in the mainstream is apparently really offensive. And they arrested me on the basis of it being a public order. So I'm a threat to the public in some regard, apparently, because of the words I'm spreading. And then I was detained in total, I think, for about 11 hours.
I am currently under arrest for wearing a sign which subjectively you deem as being too controversial to provoke what?
About controversial. And what is that the fact that it is likely to cause harassment, alarm, or distress?
So you admit that these people are what? Dangerous?
I'm not saying anything about these people. I don't think that's a necessary part of the offence that you've committed.
No, actually, I identify as a woman. Can I have a woman search me? Welcome to George Orwell, 1984, 2025. Thank you. Badge numbers and so forth, but yeah, apparently nonsense. So I've got a police officer giving his opinion now. That's rare. I thought they were supposed to be impartial.
I was in solitary for a good 9 hours, and I have been released on something called a pre-charge, which is not a charge, but it's to say that charges could come later on down the line, but also with bail conditions which ban me from the city of Westminster as well. So I'm no longer able to commute into the centre of London.
What is going on in England?
Well, I would say that this actually started in lockdown, and really started in lockdown. I mean, that people seem to forget this, that social media was a place where if you spoke up against the lockdown narrative, you were banned. If you spoke up against vaccine or vaccine mandates, you were banned. There was censorship and mass control of speech. And I myself and many other people, even Rebel News, I think, covered quite a bit of this, discussing the same principle of we don't have the ability to discuss a counter-argument. Now, this is vital because people forget that that's the case, and we're sort of leaving that part of our history behind, which I don't think we should because it's still not been properly addressed. We're seeing a lot of people, a lot of the general public who kind of stood for lockdown and stood for a lot of the things that I just listed, who are kind of surprised by the fact that when you look at other topics, like may it be talking about mass migration, both legal or illegal, or may it be talking about the trans issues and so forth, like, whoa, well, that's not good. You know, why are we having censorship there? Well, ultimately, this did start in lockdown times, and I think that set a precedent because we buckled under the regime of our government and also other, you could say Davos, World Economic Forum, United Nations and so forth. And because of that, they realised, well, we can do what we want. So they've gone full steam ahead with mass authoritarianism, curtailing our freedom of speech and freedom of expression. So I have to say I'm not shocked. I foresaw this, I could foresee this happening 5 years ago. And what we're seeing now is George Orwell 1984 coming into play.
Do you think the Trump administration is on the right track with their fight to protect female sports and recognizing only 2 genders? What else should they do, in your own opinion, to protect the female? Yeah,
I mean, definitely. I mean, first of all, it's important to note that, in my opinion, this word misogynist gets thrown around these days. If you're a man and you promote masculinity, you're a misogynist, which is all obviously ridiculous, and there's a huge attack on masculinity. But if we were to use that term, I'm not a big fan of it in any regard, really. You could say that trans individuals who are specifically men identifying as women are misogynists. You know, they seem to have this strange obsession with women and wanting to invade female spaces and not protect them. And Trump says a lot of good things, but I think he's also said a few ridiculous things too. But, you know, I'm not a Puritan. I'm not going to, you know, write someone off because of that. So the direction of preaching for free speech, especially more recently, is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I've had a bit of a mad few days, so I've not been too up to date on news and so forth. But there really is a push on Trump's end to sort of not commit to trade deals and dealings, especially with the UK, unless we open up the avenues for free speech. So to that extent, you know, I can't criticise that, which is shocking because I'm English and I should be defending my country, but it's hard to do that when I'm being jailed for and being banned from the centre of my capital city for stating a fact. It's insanity.
Do you remember those times? But in lockdown, we didn't see that, did we? We saw the police behave horrifically. We saw see what the police are doing now, cuffing me for what? Freedom of expression, freedom of speech, inciting nothing. I had calm, rational debates with people. I was not disrespectful. I love people. I'm a Christian.
What we are seeing with censorship and the far left ideology trying to censor other voices like yours, what do you see for your future and the future of England and other countries like Canada and Germany and everywhere?
There will be a shift because ultimately I always am optimistic and believe that truth will prevail eventually, and it's going to be a really grim process. I think a lot of people got quite excited when Trump came in because they thought, oh, well, that will just be mimicked over in the UK. But that hasn't happened. And in fact, when we had the court ruling around how many genders there are and so forth, that actually made things worse. Legally speaking, yes, great. Culturally speaking, shops, corporate businesses, universities, schools reinforced and fought back against that court ruling and had a great reaction to it. That's why I think, you know, the police arrested me for saying something which is in line with the court ruling in terms of this, what is supposed to be a renewed, reformed culture around how many genders there are. I mean, I don't even believe in gender.
Mark Carney famously sent his own daughter to the discredited Tavistock transgender clinic.
Yeah.
So what do you think gender ideology is so prevalent in liberal, so-called progressive circles?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Tavistock clinic is horrific, and it's been, in the UK, you know, closed down, and there was a huge scandal around that. Not that the mainstream media wanted to pick up on that. And I made that clear, actually, in my arrest video. I actually said that to the police. You know, I was like, the Tavistock clinic was closed down for mutilating young people. So why are you saying that? Why am I being arrested when I'm literally backing what's already, you know, been put into the mainstream to an extent?
Do you believe that if you were not a white Christian doing what you did, and it was mainly like a Muslim or another religion, do you believe that you will have received the same treatment?
I believe that my demographic, which is just sort of a standard British, I would say English lad who is not gay, is straight, and believes in traditional values, I would say that I am one of the most oppressed demographics in the UK. And when you say that to people who don't necessarily agree with you, even to a little bit of extent, that just shocks them. But that is the case because we are treated completely differently. You know, there's cases where people have applied to jobs at the BBC, one with a CV of a load of brilliant qualifications, but they're white and don't tick the DEI box and diversity box. And then they've submitted another CV with fair to middling, like, okay qualifications, but they've registered as being gay and black, and that person's got the job. That's what we're seeing in the UK. I would say that, I can't say for sure, but I do certainly think I would be treated differently. I am a Christian, and Christians are under attack in the UK. We literally have Christians who are praying outside of abortion clinics getting arrested. That's the most disgusting, outrageous. And we're supposed to be a Christian country. We're supposed to be built on Christian values. It's just abhorrent. And we have a culture where, well, we have a two-tier system. It's just a standard term now, isn't it? It's just accepted. I did say this to the police officer. I said, what if I was Muslim? And his response was, you know, wouldn't make a difference. Well, of course he'd say that, but, you know, what if I was Muslim? You know, what if I was there with half a dozen Muslims? Would you arrest all the Muslims? You just wouldn't. You know, I don't believe you would, because it, you know, and I'll say one last thing. When I was actually arrested, obviously you have to be searched and you have to go through the whole, you know, check-in procedure. And the gentleman that was on the desk, he said to me, I'm about to ask you a series of questions, but it's really important that you don't feel offended by anything I ask you. These may be questions that could upset you. Question 1 was, do you identify as white and English? It's like, that's the process. And I'm like, no, I just started laughing. I was like, come on. And this is this is systemic. This is what is inside of the police system, education system, government, media, social life, everything. It's everywhere. But I do think the British people know it's nonsense. It's just they're not willing to act on that. And that's what we need. We need action.
We need to stop what is going on in our school system. And in Canada, we have a petition at Ribbon News that is stopclassroomgrooming.com. It's still the time. You can go and sign it, sign the petition and share it to your friend, your family, your loved one. We need to stop and to protect our children.